Gaddafi, for those who don't know, was the long-time leader of the African state of Libya, and he died during a war. I think it was what, 2000, would have been 2000, during Obama's time. Obama authorized an attack on Libya, and then there was a rebellion in Libya, and Gaddafi was captured. We're now learning apparently his execution, which was extrajudicial, was arranged by the French. But you know, I think the reason you're asking this question is because there's a general story that Gaddafi was a Pan-Africanist. You know, there's a problem a little bit. Gaddafi was a controversial. Let me first state that the staging base where the jets, the American planes that were bombing Libya, were stationing partly in Italy and other European countries for refueling before flying over the airspace in Libya to bomb. Now, the fuel depots that were supplying these planes were using fuel from Libya. Okay. Gaddafi had an arrangement where he supplied fuel to Italy, and he had deals he had signed with Canada and with the Europeans a few years prior to his attack. And he did this because he never, when he was going to start selling fuel to these people, there were people in the African Union who told him not to do so, and he didn't listen. So you know what? The jets that bombed Libya were fueled by his own oil. This is the problem with Africans. We are now giving the resources they're using against us. But that was a blatant problem. There was a very direct connection between this jet is refueling clearly with the Libyan oil, Libyan fuel. So why did he do that? Also, you have to remember that Gaddafi did not entirely respect the due process that was required to set up the African Union properly. When Gaddafi in the 70s was part of the OAU, he pulled out at some point because he didn't either understand or did not care very much for Pan-Africanism. Like he did not attend an OAU meeting, OAU being the Organization of African Unity, which is the precursor to the African Union, for 22 years. He never went to a Pan-African meeting for 22 years. But during that time, he organized something, an army that invaded Chad, and he tried to Islamize parts of Africa by force. He set up training camps that trained the RUF, the Revolutionary United Front, in the civil war in Sierra Leone, remember in the 90s. And these people were brutal. They were cutting noses and mutilating Africans and doing things like that. So yeah, of course, yeah, he, you know, everybody's a Pan-Africanist because they support African unity, but people don't actually live up to that expectation. They do things contrary to that, you see. So that's a question mark. Now, when Iraq was going to be attacked by the by the Americans, the coalition against Saddam Hussein, remember Saddam Hussein had issues initially, and what they did is that Gaddafi sent his 22-year-old daughter at the time, I don't know if she was 22, maybe she was older, I don't remember, but he sent her as the chief negotiator. The African Union at the time refused to be engaged in those things and had a procedure for negotiating. He did not follow it. I don't want to knock, you know, any Pan-Africanist or Gaddafi specifically because he has such a high reputation among Africans. But you have to understand that many of the problems that Gaddafi faced and the ones that we are facing in Africa are self-inflicted. Okay, they're self-inflicted because we refuse constantly, our leaders refuse to follow due process. You know, you decide to go it alone. You negotiate with Italy to give them concessions. They had a big summit in Libya about 2, 3 years before he was attacked with other countries. And I remember specifically I was in Canada, and I remember being frustrated because uh, they sent a team of Canadian negotiators to Libya, and we thought they were going to talk about the African Union, and they were going to talk about how Gaddafi could, you know, re-engage with the international community, so because they had no-fly zones and things like that. And we realized in the end they were negotiating for oil. That's all. They weren't interested in democracy. They were not interested in Pan-Africanism, or what we could do with, you know, with improving the economy of the world, or of Africa, of anything like that. It was simple greed by these people who are all diplomats interested in going back home with a piece of paper to boast a resume. You know, I worked, I got this thing done, I need an appointment or money or whatever. And these people, when they get out of these jobs as government workers, they then join boards of directors of these multinational corporations that are what they use to extract mineral resources at cheap prices. You know, so yeah, Gaddafi was a Pan-Africanist, but he made errors that resulted in his execution, essentially. Yeah, and that's a problem. And I'm a Pan-Africanist personally, but I'm also a Democrat. I mean, I believe in parliaments, parliamentary supremacy. Gaddafi ran a country without a parliament. Somebody might say, well, is democracy an African thing? Well, yes, Africans have always had parliaments. There are no dictators in Africa prior to the colonial era. Ancient Egypt had a parliament, even though they had in fact, the word pharaoh means great house. It doesn't refer to the king. The king was the Nesubiti, right? The parliament was the pharaoh. That's what it meant. The word pharaoh refers to a parliament. So the pharaoh, the king, would have a council who advised him. The pharaoh had a council that advised. This is the parliament of Africa. You know, the Kushites had a parliament. The great empire of Mali had the Karankan Fuga, which is the constitution. So the kings of Mali, the emperors of Mali, Abubakar II, the richest man ever in history of the world, had a parliament and a constitution. He was a constitutional monarch. So when they tell us about democracy or constitutional monarchies or responsible government or transparent or accountability in government, this is something that Africans have always had. So when you get a new leader like Gaddafi who doesn't understand or respect those things, then you wonder, you know, what's the deal with that? You know, is he running, was Gaddafi running an ideal African system of government? And if he didn't, then why do you keep referring to him as a Pan-Africanist? Yes, he supported African unity, but how? I'll give you an example. Like, I was part of a group of people who helped promote the African Union before it was created. And as soon as the process was about to be completed, you know, there was a convention in Lome in Togo, which had to make the resolution formally instituting the African Union. Gaddafi came for the first time after 22 years. He came to attend that. And what he did is offered 17 million to move the capital of Africa from Addis Ababa to his hometown in Sirte in Libya. And all of us who did not have $17 million to offer, we got kicked out of the system, you know. We were Pan-Africanists, you know, what happened with that? So yeah, I mean, Gaddafi, you know, just like every other leader in Africa, everybody has some lip service. They say, oh yeah, we're Pan-Africanists in that we believe that there should be African unity. But what have they actually done in terms of promoting Pan-Africanism or actually putting resources towards the viability of African unity? You know, have they integrated their armies with other African states? Have they integrated a single currency with other African states? Have they opened up their borders for Africans from other countries to come and live there and participate in the democratic process? You can check how many countries in Africa, how many states have judges or teachers or army commanders from other African states. Do we do that? Then are we Pan-Africanists? You know, Kwame Nkrumah did that. Kwame Nkrumah did that the other African founders of the OAU allowed people in their countries, in their states, to be from other states. Actually, Africa was more integrated in the 60s, before independence, than after independence. Before independence, Africans referred to themselves as Africans first. They didn't understand what Kenya was. They didn't go around saying they're Kenyan, they weren't Africans. All the political parties were African Union this, African Union that. KANU, it was an area, then African. And now we have political parties that don't mention the word African in them. In fact, all the founding parties in Africa had the word African as part of their, what do you call it, part of the name. Yeah, it was the Kenya African National Union, it was the Pan-African Congress, it was the African National Congress in South Africa, not the Zulu National Congress, not the Xhosa National Congress, not the South African National, it was African National Congress. All over. And now where are they? You know, what's happened to them? You know, we have all these political parties now that don't have mention Africa, don't have in their manifesto anything to do with Africa. Now I know that Nigeria has a I think they have a ministry, or they had a ministry a few years back that dealt with African integration. And also I think that in Uganda we have a Pan-African secretariat here, and so on and so forth. But all these are not the same institutions that were powerful at the time, because in the 60s, Uganda actually had a Pan-African office in Cairo. You know, they had a minister in the government assigned to deal with Pan-Africanism in the rest of the world, you know, in other places. But if you go to America now, all the African states have their own embassy. We don't have a common embassy in Africa to deal with, or abroad to deal with Africans traveling back from diaspora. Every little state has its own policy. So yeah, you know, we're falling back in terms of Pan-Africanism, and I think that Gaddafi and other African states, which are all complaining about how they're being pressured by, you know, foreign powers to do this or do that, or they're not failing to get any help, it's because we're not being Pan-Africanist. Sufficiently Pan-Africanist to build the institutions that are required to maintain African unity in the face of the challenges of a globalized economy. And because of that, we are going to be negotiating different deals with the African Union, the European Union separately from China, separately from America, separately from every multinational corporation has a different deal with every African state. And that's not a good thing, that's a bad thing. So we need to have the African Union set up a single negotiating team and review all treaties so that they have consistency all across the continent. You know, the last time there was a Pan-African military command meeting was in 1988. That was set up, it was called the African Chiefs of Defense Forces. And they had all the African Heads of Defense Forces meet in Addis to craft a common military policy for the defense of Africa. 1988 is how many years ago now? You know, it's a long time. So first of all, I think that you can't blame China or Europe or America or anybody else for coming to negotiate separately, because they don't see that there's a single office where they have to go. So you need to set up that office and say you go there. And so when they come to Uganda, you ask them, did you get a referral from that office? A simple thing. And if they say yes, then you can negotiate with a witness from the African Union sitting present in that meeting, so that they can report back to the rest of Africa what was done, unless it's secret. But if it's not a secret, it's a trade deal, it ought to be open to everybody, rather than us finding out in the newspapers that Senegal has an arrangement with Portugal or someplace like that we don't know about. You know, we need to be on the table at every single negotiation as Pan-Africanists.
Well, let me hear you say,